Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Training and Chess with Coach Rafi Chowdhury. Today, I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit about how to play chess and just some basic opening principles. And then we will actually look at some common traps and tricks and things like that you can fall for at the opening. So, in the opening, the most important thing that you should probably try to do is control the center of the board. Why is that important? If you're controlling the center of the board, your pieces can easily get access to different parts of the board, right? You can easily transfer your pieces over wherever they need to go to attack certain parts of the board. At the same time, if you have control over the center of the board, it's a lot harder for your opponents to put pieces and to guard those central squares as well. So typically, a good move in the beginning is the pawn to e4, or even a pawn to d4 might be a good move as well if you didn't want to play that one. You can also start the game with the move 1d4. You can also develop one of your pieces out in the beginning, like knight to f3, which actually controls these squares over here. Or you can consider knight to c3, which controls the center square on d5 and the one on e4 as well. But in this game, we can continue with this move pawn to e4, which occupies one of the central squares and then attacks the square over here on d5. Black can respond by simply playing the pawn to e5, which stops white's pawn from advancing, occupies a central square, and attacks another central square here on d4. White now plays knight to f3. This develops a piece, which brings us to our second principle, is you should actually develop your chess pieces from the squares where they start the game to a different square that's near the center that helps guard squares towards the center. So this knight develops towards the center and then attacks the square on e5 and the square on d4. So this obviously puts pressure on this black pawn, because if black didn't protect the pawn, let's just say black played some random move like pawn to a6, white would simply capture the pawn on e5. So therefore, it makes sense for black to protect the pawn on e5 by developing perhaps the knight to c6, which develops a piece and attacks the pawn in the center at the same time. Now what we can do as white is maybe take over more of the center with a pawn move like d4, which totally breaks open the center and challenges black's pawn in the center. We can develop our other knight, which controls more central squares on d4 and e4 and develops a piece. Or we can develop our bishop, which develops the bishop, again controls the center square on d5 and then attacks this weak square on f7 at the same time. And also it prepares to castle, which is also another one of our opening principles, is that we want to get the king to safety as quickly as possible. So in this particular opening, white is going to play pawn to d4. Black now has a couple of options to take with the pawn, to take with the knight. Those are probably the most reasonable options black has. Obviously, black can play a move like d6, protecting that pawn on e5, but I think that move is inferior, and because of a couple of reasons. White can simply capture. Black captures, and white can actually capture the queen. And if black captures with a knight, then black would lose the pawn on e5. Oops. And if he captures with a king, he has lost his ability to castle his king, so his king will not be able to castle. But even then, this position is probably okay, simply because the queens have already been exchanged. It's not going to be that difficult for black to survive this position without much problems, but even if he's not able to castle. But even then, I wouldn't play that move personally. I would opt for a much better move, which is d takes, or e takes d4, which simply captures the pawn. White may now just capture back, and black can capture the knight back and head into this kind of position, but it's better for black to just center, strike back in the center or develop another piece. So black might consider a move like knight Maybe map to try d6. Black can try even d5 if he wants to be aggressive. Probably most logical could also be a move like bishop to c5. Check. I mean, not check. Attacking the knight here on d4. There's a bunch of moves here, but mainly we want to focus on just developing our pieces. So this move makes sense right here. Bishop to e3. Black can now consider the pawn to d6 now. Now the bishop has already been developed. It makes sense that he try to develop the other bishop as well. White can also focus on the same thing, developing his bishops. You can even consider the bishop to b5, pinning the knight to the king. That might even be a stronger move in this position, actually. Black can now develop another piece. Well, not right now because his knight is being attacked twice and only defended one time. So we can consider a move like bishop to d7, which breaks this thing called a pin. Now the black knight is again able to freely move without putting the king under attack. After this, white can just castle and bring his king to safety and activate his rook at the same time. Black may choose to now develop one of his pieces, knight to f6, developing a piece and getting ready to castle. White can also just develop a piece. Black can castle. And now both sides are starting to finish up opening developments. So the next thing that's left is for white to connect the rooks, meaning the rooks should be actually able to protect each other. So moving the queen to d2 actually accomplishes that task where the rooks are actually connected. And black can do the same thing by putting the queen to e7 maybe, which develops the queen, puts more pressure on this pawn on e4, and also protects the rooks. Maybe white will just defend with this move f3. And both sides have developed their pieces here. Both sides are looking okay here. There's no anything crazy that I can see that's going on in this position. Fairly quiet position. And this is the kind of chess that you should consider playing as a beginner chess player. You should try to consider controlling the center, getting your pieces out, developing your pieces, castling as early as possible, and connecting your rooks. And you should hopefully have a good game and be able to beat your dad the next time you play chess. Thanks, guys. That's all I have for this video. And leave some comments below in the description and let me know if you have any particular questions or if there are any particular openings that you guys would like to see. Thanks again, and I'll leave some links to some more blog posts and things like that I've published on my website that kind of cover some of these openings as well. Thank you.